My name is Daniel Cole, and if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have said my life was as normal as anyone else's. I lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Atlanta, Georgia, with my wife, Rachel, and our 5-year-old son, Elijah. I worked as a project manager for a mid-sized construction firm, managing commercial sites across the state. I was the kind of man who planned everything, every dollar in our joint account, every weekend family trip, every renovation project in our modest but cozy home. My life revolved around stability. Mornings began at 6:30 a.m. sharp. I'd pour Rachel her favorite caramel latte from our kitchen espresso machine, pack Elijah's lunch, and make sure we all left the house on time. Rachel didn't work. By mutual agreement, she stayed home with Elijah, and I took care of the finances. Or so I thought. We weren't rich, but we were doing okay. No overdue bills. No reckless spending. I even managed to put away a little every month into a savings account for Elijah's future. Rachel, for all outward appearances, was a loving wife, thoughtful, kind, and always smiling in public. She organized playdates, helped Elijah with his phonics homework, and baked a mean banana bread that our neighbors still talk about. But beneath the surface of our domestic life, something was beginning to shift. I didn't notice it at first, just little things. Rachel started locking her phone, claiming it was for privacy. She'd disappear into the other room when certain calls came in. She told me it was just her cousin Maya or her mom. I believed her. I always did. My friends used to joke that I was too trusting. I laughed it off. Why wouldn't I trust the woman I had been with for 8 years, the mother of my child? We had gone through so much together, student loans, job changes, moving cities. We had built a life together from the ground up. It never occurred to me that she could betray me, not in the way that she did. There was one night I remember clearly. A thunderstorm was shaking the windows, and Rachel sat at the dining table, staring at her laptop, the glow reflecting in her tired eyes. I walked over, curious, but she quickly slammed the lid shut. "Just browsing," she said with a forced smile. I raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" She nodded too quickly, muttering something about online recipes. I let it go, but something in her tone unsettled me. Around this time, a few subtle financial discrepancies began cropping up. Small ones. A $200 charge from a store I didn't recognize. A credit card statement that looked off. Rachel told me it was a mistake. Maybe a charge from an old account or something for Elijah she forgot to mention. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. At work, I was too distracted to push deeper into the inconsistencies. My boss had just assigned me a new project, and we were under pressure to complete it on time. Long hours, late nights, and Rachel's increasingly strange behavior became my new normal. I chalked her mood swings up to stress. Maybe she was feeling the weight of being a stay-at-home mom. I even suggested therapy, but she dismissed the idea. Still, the signs were there. I just didn't connect the dots. Then one day, something unusual happened. It was a Saturday. We had just finished lunch, and Rachel said she was going to visit her mother. Elijah wanted to go, but she insisted it would be a short trip. She left, and I decided to clean out the garage, something I'd been putting off for weeks. While digging through some boxes labeled holiday decor, I found a dusty old file folder that didn't belong in there. It was out of place, too new, too deliberate. Curious, I opened it. Inside were loan documents. Not one but several. All under my name. All bearing forged signatures. I froze. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Someone must have stolen my identity, I told myself. Maybe a scam. But the documents listed our home address, my social security number, details no outsider could possibly know. My heart sank. The bank name caught my eye, Southern Cross Finance. I'd never done business with them. The total loan balance? $48,000. I sat down on the cold concrete floor and stared at the folder like it might vanish. My hands were trembling. The documents were dated over the past 6 months. Monthly withdrawals. Payment schedules. None of which I had known about. I checked our bank account, and that's when I saw it. Transfers made to a separate account under Rachel's name. A name I hadn't even known she was using. It felt like my entire world was slipping through my fingers. But even then, a part of me wanted to believe there was some explanation. That Rachel was in trouble and didn't want to burden me. That she had made a mistake and panicked. I told myself it was desperation, not deceit. When she returned home that evening, I didn't confront her right away. I watched her as she kissed Elijah's forehead, took off her shoes, and went to change into her pajamas, like it was any other day. But for me, the air had shifted. I saw her with different eyes. I noticed the way she avoided eye contact, how she checked her phone every few minutes. That night, as she slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Why would she do this? How long had she been planning it? And most of all, what else didn't I know? Something was unraveling, and I had a sinking feeling that this was only the beginning. The next morning, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I waited until Elijah was watching cartoons in the living room and Rachel was in the kitchen pouring her coffee. I came in holding the folder. "Rachel," I said, placing the file on the table. "What is this?" She barely looked up. "What do you mean?" "These loan papers," I said slowly. "They're my name. My signature. But I never signed them." She blinked, then went completely still. Her fingers tightened around the coffee mug. For a second, she didn't say anything. Then she let out a breath and sat down. "I can explain," she said softly. My heart was pounding. "You'd better." She rubbed her temples and looked at the table, avoiding my eyes. "I didn't mean to do it like this. I was going to tell you. I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That you'd be angry. That you wouldn't understand." "Try me." She took a long pause before answering. "It started when Elijah had that dental surgery last year. Our savings weren't enough to cover the whole thing. You were already stressed with work, and I didn't want to put more pressure on you. So I took out a small loan just to get by." "Without telling me?" "I thought I could handle it," she said quickly. "But then other things came up. School fees, groceries, medical bills. One turned into another, and then I couldn't stop." "You couldn't stop?" I repeated. "Rachel, this isn't gambling. This is fraud. You forged my signature. You took out multiple loans in my name without my knowledge. That's not a small mistake. That's a crime." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. "Not then. Not yet." "I was desperate," she whispered. "I didn't know what else to do." I stared at her in disbelief. All this time, I thought we were a team. I thought I was providing, protecting, planning for our future. But she had been lying to me, day after day, month after month, while smiling to my face. "Do you realize what this means?" I said, my voice low but sharp. "Our credit is ruined. Our savings are almost gone. If these loans default, we could lose the house." She nodded, sobbing quietly. "I know. I'm sorry. But sorry didn't fix it." The days that followed were a blur. I took time off work to begin damage control. I visited Southern Cross Finance and other institutions listed in the paperwork. I confirmed what I already knew. The signatures were forged, the accounts linked to her name, the payments missed. The worst part? Some of the loans had ballooned with interest and late fees. I had to act quickly to protect what little we had left. One banker, a woman named Ms. Torres, was brutally honest with me. "Mr. Cole," she said, flipping through the loan documents, "this situation could be reported to the authorities. Identity theft, even within a marriage, is a federal crime." That word, crime, echoed in my mind like thunder. "She's my wife," I murmured, unsure whether I was saying it to her or to myself. "She's also someone who committed fraud against you," Ms. Torres replied gently. "You can still take legal action. It's up to you." The weight of those words sat heavy on my chest. Legal action? Against Rachel? The mother of my child? The woman I once loved more than anything? When I returned home that night, I found Rachel sitting in the dark. She didn't speak. I didn't either. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. Our arguments grew louder. Elijah, poor boy, started asking why Mommy and Daddy were always sad. I tried to shield him, but it was impossible. The tension in the house was suffocating. I slept on the couch. Rachel barely left her room. Our marriage, once built on trust and warmth, had become a cold battleground. Then came the final blow. I received a letter in the mail from a collections agency. Not only were we behind on payments, but a lien had been placed on the house. One more missed installment, and we could be looking at foreclosure. I confronted Rachel again. "You said it was just a few loans," I snapped. "Now the house is on the line?" She broke down completely. "I messed up. I didn't know how to stop. I was afraid to come clean." "What else haven't you told me?" That's when she confessed something that made my blood run cold. "There's one more loan," she whispered. "A bigger one." "How much?" $22,000. I felt like the floor had collapsed beneath me. "What did you do with it?" She hesitated, then said, "I gave it to my brother. He needed help. He said he'd pay it back." "Your brother? You gave him $22,000 of my money, without telling me?" "He was going to lose his apartment, Daniel. And what about us? You've risked everything we built. Our credit, our home, our family, because you didn't want to face me?" She didn't answer. That night, I made a decision. I packed a bag and took Elijah with me to my brother's place for the weekend. I needed space to think. Rachel begged me not to go, but I had nothing left to give her. My trust was gone. I needed clarity, and more importantly, I needed to protect my son. Over those 2 days, I reflected on everything. The betrayal, the deception, the lies she spun while I broke my back to keep us afloat. When I returned Sunday evening, I told Rachel the truth. "We're separating." She looked shattered. "Daniel, please."
No.
"I'm not doing this anymore. You crossed a line I can't ignore." She begged.
She cried.
But I was done. What she didn't realize then was that karma was already on its way, and it wasn't coming slowly. 2 weeks passed after the separation. I stayed at my brother Jason's house with Elijah, trying to create some sense of normalcy for my son. Each night, as I read him bedtime stories and tucked him in, I wondered how much of this chaos he truly understood. He was only 6, but children know more than we think. He missed his mother. I could see it in his eyes. But I also knew I couldn't protect him by returning to a home built on lies. During that time, I contacted a lawyer, not to punish Rachel, but to protect myself and Elijah. We began the process of legally separating assets and discussing custody. That's when the lawyer uncovered something shocking. She didn't just take out loans, he told me, sliding another folder across the desk. She listed your job details to get approved and even submitted falsified tax documents under your name. I stared at the papers, numb. She committed full-blown identity fraud? Legally speaking, yes. And it's enough to press criminal charges. I didn't say anything. My stomach was twisted in knots. As much as I was furious, hurt, and betrayed, I never imagined I'd be in a position where I had to decide whether or not to send the mother of my child to jail. The following evening, I met Rachel at a neutral location, a quiet park near the house we once shared. She looked different, worn down, hollow-eyed. She clutched a file in her hand, just like I had done weeks earlier. "Why did you ask to meet?" I asked. She sat down slowly on the bench and opened the folder. "I want to show you something." Inside were signed letters. Letters from her brother, from her old job, and from the debt collectors. She had started taking full responsibility for every loan. She was working with a debt management agency. She had even begun paying back the ones she could. "I'm trying to fix it," she said. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I know I've hurt you in ways I can never undo. But I'm not going to let this destroy our son's future." I was silent for a long time. The anger was still there, but so was something else. Sadness. Grief. We had lost something sacred. "I appreciate that," I said finally. "But this changes nothing between us. I'm still moving forward with the separation." She nodded slowly. "I understand. But," I added, "if you keep making progress and stay accountable, I won't file charges." A tear rolled down her cheek. "Thank you." We stood in silence for a few moments, watching kids play on the nearby swings. I thought about how close we had come to losing everything and how fragile life could be when trust was broken. Then, just when I thought I had seen the worst of it, the universe threw me another curveball. 2 days later, I received a phone call from Elijah's school. "Mr. Cole," the principal said, "we need you to come in. There's been a situation involving your wife." My stomach sank. When I arrived, I was ushered into a small office where the principal and 2 police officers were waiting. Elijah sat quietly in the corner, coloring a picture with his head down. "What's going on?" I asked, eyes darting between the adults in the room. The principal explained. Earlier that day, Rachel had come to the school to pick up Elijah, without authorization. When the school reminded her of the court agreement that stated I had primary custody, she became agitated. She tried to take Elijah anyway. Staff had to intervene. The police were called. Rachel fled before they arrived. "She tried to take him?" I asked in disbelief. The officers nodded. "We're actively searching for her. She's now in violation of a family court order." I walked over to Elijah and knelt beside him. "Hey, buddy. Are you okay?" He nodded. "Mommy was crying. She said she missed me." I hugged him tightly, my heart aching for him.
He didn't deserve this.
None of it. That night, I filed for full custody. I couldn't take any more risks. Rachel had crossed a line again. But karma wasn't finished with her yet. The very next week, I got a call from my attorney. Rachel had been arrested. She had attempted to use a fake identity to apply for yet another loan. This time, the lender flagged the documents and alerted authorities. When they ran her record, the previous fraud cases we were already working to resolve came up. She was taken into custody and charged with multiple counts of fraud and identity theft. The irony was almost cruel. All the chances I gave her to make it right, she squandered. All the faith I tried to hold on to shattered. I went to the hearing, not because I wanted to see her punished, but because I needed closure. She stood there in the courtroom, in a wrinkled suit and handcuffs, her once bright spirit now dulled with shame. When the judge asked if anyone wanted to speak, I rose to my feet. "Your Honor," I said clearly, "this isn't just about money. This is about trust. About a woman who I gave my life to, who used that trust to break the law and endanger our family. I'm here today to protect my son, and I ask the court to consider that above all else." Rachel broke down in tears. But this time, I didn't comfort her. That day marked a turning point, not just in the case, but in my own heart. I had carried so much anger, so much grief. But finally, I began to let it go, because justice was being served. And karma? It had finally caught up. Rachel's sentencing took place 3 months after her arrest. She pleaded guilty to several charges in a deal that would reduce her sentence if she completed a financial rehabilitation program while serving time. The judge, moved by her previous lack of a criminal record and the fact that she had begun repaying some of the loans, sentenced her to 18 months in a women's correctional facility with a mandatory counseling requirement. When I left the courthouse that day, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not happiness. Not triumph. Just peace. It was over. The legal battles, the sleepless nights, the constant second-guessing of every decision I made, all of it was finally coming to a close. My focus shifted entirely to Elijah. I rearranged my work schedule so I could pick him up from school every day. We started a new bedtime tradition, gratitude journaling. Every night, we each said 3 things we were grateful for. Sometimes he'd say silly things like pizza or my new dinosaur socks, but more often than not, he'd say, "You, Daddy." One day, while driving home from a weekend trip to the zoo, Elijah asked me something that made my heart twist. "Will Mommy ever be okay again?" I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. He looked so small, clutching his stuffed tiger. "Yes, buddy," I said gently. "Mommy's getting help. Sometimes people get really lost, and they do things that hurt others. But when they decide to change and work hard, they can find their way back." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." That conversation stayed with me. It reminded me that even in pain, children cling to hope. And maybe so should I. The transformation in my life didn't happen overnight, but it came slowly in little waves. Therapy helped me work through the betrayal. I began to understand the patterns that led me to ignore so many red flags. I learned not to carry shame for someone else's mistakes. One major change was my view of forgiveness. For a long time, I thought forgiving Rachel would be like saying what she did was okay. But I realized that forgiveness wasn't about excusing the harm. It was about freeing myself from the chains of resentment. So I forgave her, not because she deserved it, but because Elijah deserved a father who wasn't emotionally weighed down by rage. I never told her directly. I didn't need to. But internally, I released her. That was enough. Meanwhile, Rachel began sending Elijah letters from prison. At first, I was hesitant to show them to him, but after consulting with his therapist, I agreed. He needed to maintain a connection, even a limited one, with his mother. The letters were raw and honest. She told him she loved him. She told him she was learning how to be better. Sometimes she sent drawings or short stories. One letter read, "I know I hurt Daddy and that I made a lot of big mistakes. But I want you to know that you are the best thing I ever created. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be someone you can be proud of." Elijah drew her a picture in response. A picture of their family, me, him, and her. He had drawn her behind a window, with hearts all around. I sent it to her. The consequences of Rachel's choices were heavy, but they didn't end her story. And strangely, they helped me rewrite mine. I was no longer a man who lived in denial. I was a father grounded in clarity and strength. I started a blog called Lessons from the Wreckage. I shared pieces of my journey, anonymously at first. The response was overwhelming. Strangers from around the world messaged me, saying they saw themselves in my story. Men and women alike thanked me for shedding light on a topic so often kept in the shadows: financial abuse and betrayal within marriage. Eventually, a publisher reached out, asking if I'd be open to writing a memoir. I agreed. Writing the book became another form of healing. It forced me to revisit every moment, from the blissful beginning to the catastrophic unraveling, and find meaning in each part. By the time Rachel was released, 18 months later, my book was in editing, Elijah was thriving, and I had fully regained control over my finances and my peace. When she got out, she wrote to me, asking if we could meet. We met at a local cafe, not the same one where everything had exploded, but a new one near her transitional housing program. She looked different, older, but clearer. "Thank you for not giving up on Elijah," she said. "And thank you for not pressing more charges when you could have." "You needed help more than punishment," I replied. "And I needed to move on." She nodded. "I'll never stop regretting what I did." "I hope you turn that regret into something useful," I said softly. "For him." She promised she would. And this time, I believed her. We worked out a supervised visitation plan. I stayed nearby during each visit, ensuring Elijah felt safe and supported. Over time, their relationship slowly began to rebuild, not perfectly, but piece by piece. As for me, I realized that my life, which had once felt like it had crumbled into rubble, had been rebuilt into something even stronger, wiser,
Kinder.
and far more resilient. Because sometimes, when someone betrays you in the worst possible way, the transformation you undergo isn't just about healing. It's about becoming someone new, not broken, but reborn. 3 years after the day my world collapsed, I stood in front of a packed auditorium giving a talk titled Betrayal, Bankruptcy, and Becoming Whole Again. The applause at the end wasn't just polite. It was real.
Felt.
Earned. I wasn't famous. I wasn't rich. But I was finally free, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And I had built something that no one could steal or forge, a life rooted in truth. My book had gone on to become a quiet success, not a bestseller, but it found its audience. Therapists used it with clients. Support groups read it together. I was invited to speak at conferences about financial trauma, emotional betrayal, and rebuilding from relational ruin. The pain I had once wished I could erase had now become the bridge I used to help others cross their own storms. And Elijah? He was thriving. Now 7, he was curious, sharp, and full of heart. He asked tough questions sometimes about prison, about lies, about why families fall apart. But I never lied to him. I just told him the truth in a way a child could understand. People make mistakes. Sometimes really big ones. But it's what they do after the mistake that matters most. He had his ups and downs with Rachel. Their relationship wasn't seamless, but it was sincere. She had found a job at a nonprofit helping women transition out of prison. She wasn't the same person she had been before. Neither was I. My new reality was simpler and more intentional. I downsized from the house we once shared and bought a small craftsman bungalow with a front porch and a backyard full of tall grass and wildflowers. It was peaceful, warm, and honest, just like the life I was trying to live. Every Sunday, Elijah and I made pancakes. Not the boxed kind, real ones from scratch. He cracked the eggs. I flipped the cakes. We added too much syrup and never cleaned up right away. That kitchen was messy, but it held laughter that didn't exist before. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the trees, Elijah rested his head on my arm and said, "Daddy, you're my hero." I blinked fast to keep the tears from spilling. "Why's that, buddy?" "Because even when everything broke, you didn't give up on me." That single sentence made every courtroom, every therapy session, every sleepless night worth it. My reality wasn't about revenge or proving anything to Rachel. It wasn't about showcasing my pain like a badge. It was about choosing peace, growth, and legacy. I no longer felt the need to ask why she did what she did. Some answers don't lead to healing, they just dig deeper holes. And I wasn't living in holes anymore. I was planting gardens. The community I built through my story became a lifeline for others. I started a support group for men dealing with betrayal, a group that grew into a nationwide nonprofit. The idea that men couldn't talk about emotional pain was something I was committed to destroying. Vulnerability, I learned, was not weakness. It was revolution. I still remembered the night Rachel had sobbed on the floor, begging me not to report her. It would always be there, like a scar. But scars don't hurt. They're a mind. And I wore mine without shame. One day, Rachel asked if she could attend Elijah's school play. I said yes. I even saved her a seat. She arrived on time.
Dress simply.
No jewelry, no designer clothes, just a mother trying to make amends. Elijah spotted her from the stage and beamed. After the show, they hugged. She whispered something in his ear that made him nod and smile. Later that night, I asked what she said. She told me she's proud of me and that she's proud of you too. That surprised me. But it also settled something inside me. A full circle moment. In the aftermath of betrayal, we often fantasize about vengeance. About the betrayer getting what they deserve. But sometimes, justice looks quieter. Less cinematic. It looks like change. Accountability. Effort.
Healing.
That was enough for me. Years passed. I eventually fell in love again. With someone kind, consistent, and unshaken by my past. She loved Elijah as her own, but never tried to erase his mother. She simply added light to the corners where shadows once lived. We married in a small ceremony under a willow tree. Rachel attended. Not as an enemy, but as a woman who had walked through fire and survived her own reckoning. She sat in the third row, alone, and clapped with real joy when Elijah gave a speech about second chances and new beginnings. That night, I realized something profound. The greatest revenge is not success. It's peace. The kind that no one can counterfeit. The kind that no betrayal can undo. I looked around at the faces that night, my son, my new wife, even Rachel, and knew this life wasn't about what was taken from me. It was about what I rebuilt. With truth. With grit. With grace. My new reality wasn't the one I had once dreamed of. It was better. Because it was mine. Unshakable. Unstolen. Undeniably earned. And in the silence that followed the laughter and clinking of glasses that night, I whispered a quiet thank you. Not to the pain, but to the growth it forced. I had been broken, but I had not been destroyed. And that was everything. If there's one truth I now carry in my bones, it's this. Sometimes, being broken is the very thing that cracks you open enough to let the light in. For the longest time, I thought my story was about betrayal, about the lies, the heartbreak, the staggering cruelty of someone I once loved. But I see now that was only the beginning. My real story began the day I decided to stop bleeding and start building. It's easy to let pain define you, to live in bitterness, to replay the betrayal like a scene you can't stop watching. But bitterness is a slow poison. It eats you from the inside out while the world keeps spinning.
I didn't want to stay in that loop.
And if you're reading this, maybe you're standing in that same fire, asking yourself how you'll survive the blow you never saw coming. Maybe someone you trusted just shattered you. Maybe your world feels unrecognizable. Let me tell you this. You will survive. But survival alone isn't enough. You deserve to heal. You deserve to become someone wiser, not colder. Stronger, not harder. Braver, not just guarded. You are not what they did to you.
You are what you choose next.
I chose to rise. Not because I was stronger than others, but because I finally understood that staying down would only make their betrayal permanent. And I refused to give anyone that kind of power over my soul. The plot twist in my story wasn't Rachel going to prison. It wasn't Elijah choosing me. It wasn't even rebuilding my life from the ground up.
No.
The real twist was this. The man I became, because of the fire, was better than the man I had been before it. Not richer. Not more successful. Just real. Rooted.
Whole.
There was a time I wanted revenge. Now I want peace for myself, for my son, even for the woman who broke me. Because peace is what breaks the generational curse. Peace is what turns trauma into testimony. Peace is what rebuilds the world. So, if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Pain will visit. Betrayal might knock you off your axis. But healing? Healing is a choice. And peace is the prize. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. I promise.